I want you to imagine a political revolution for a second, but not the kind you're probably picturing right now.
Right, so no marching in the streets.
Exactly. Erase the images of protests, erase the ballot boxes, and definitely erase any kind of, violent uprisings.
Okay.
Instead, I want you to imagine a revolution that relies entirely on just ignoring the government.
Which is a pretty wild concept to wrap your head around.
It really is a revolution where people just participate in black and gray markets until the state simply becomes irrelevant.
It's a complete paradigm shift. I mean, it's a revolution of pure evasion. You aren't fighting the system, you're simply bypassing it.
And that is the core of our deep dive today. We are unpacking a really radical ideology born in the 1970s and 80s known as Agorism.
Yeah, Agorism.
And our stack of materials for this journey includes the foundational texts of the man who created it, Samuel Edward Konkin III, specifically his books, an Agorist primer and the New Libertarian Manifesto.
Both classic texts in that space.
We're also diving into a fierce historical critique of his work by the prominent economist Murray Rothbard. And finally, we'll look at how modern cryptocurrency and, internet culture are putting these theories to the ultimate test today.
Because to really grasp how people are applying these ideas now, we kind of have to start with the architect himself, right?
Yeah.
Samuel Edward Konkin III.
Often known as SEK3, right?
Yeah, SEK3. He coined the term agorism from the ancient Greek word agora, which translates to an open marketplace.
Okay, an open marketplace.
Exactly. And Konkin defined agorism as thought and action consistent with freedom, basically aiming for a completely uncoerced society.
Okay, let's unpack this because the engine of his entire philosophy rests on something he called counter-economics.
Right.
Which essentially means any non-coercive human action committed in direct defiance of the state. We're talking about the black and gray markets here.
Everything from, tax evasion and smuggling to just off-the-books labor.
Right, like if a voluntary trade happens between two people and the state doesn't get its cut or, give its blessing, that's counter-economics.
What's fascinating here is the moral framework Konkin built around this. He developed what is known as a left libertarian class theory.
Wait, class theory? Because traditional libertarianism usually doesn't talk much about class struggle. That's usually associated with Marxism, right? Like capitalists versus workers.
Exactly, it is. But Konkin's left libertarian view borrows the concept of a class war and completely redefines the combatants.
How so?
Well, he argued that the state inherently divides society into two distinct groups, a plundered class and a plundering class.
So in Konkin's eyes, the state is basically the mafia demanding protection money.
Pretty much, yeah.
The baker, the mechanic, the entrepreneur, they are creating value. They are the plundered. And the state is just the mob boss skimming off the top under the threat of violence.
That is exactly how an agorist sees it. The plundering class extracts value through taxation and regulation.
And what about politicians?
Konkin viewed them merely as gladiators.
Gladiator.
Yeah, they are put into the political arena by the ruling elite to basically put on a show, settling disputes among themselves to keep the plundered class distracted.
To make them feel like they have a voice.
Right. For an agorist, participating in that political system is literally voting for your own plunder. The only moral action is to step outside the system entirely.
But stepping outside the legal economy means risking jail time, for tax evasion or running contraband. People generally don't want to go to prison, just to make a philosophical point.
No, they don't.
So how did Konkin expect millions of ordinary people to take on that kind of legal hazard?
He expected them to do it for profit. The fundamental mechanism driving counter-economics is trading risk for profit.
Okay.
And Konkin actually formalized this into a mathematical formula. He argued that most people look at the penalty for a crime and panic without ever actually calculating the statistical probability of facing that penalty.
I want to walk through the math on this because it totally changes how you view risk. Let's say you have an opportunity to make $100,000 profit on a black market transaction.
Okay, 100 grand.
But there's a 20% chance of getting caught by the authorities. And if you are caught, the penalty is a $500,000 fine and 5 years in jail.
On paper, most people walk away from that.
Because they focus entirely on that $500,000 fine.
Right. But Konkin says you have to calculate the true risk by factoring in the inefficiency of the entire justice system.
Which is pretty inefficient.
Highly inefficient. Let's break it down. You have a 20% chance of being arrested, but the system is bogged down. Of those arrested, maybe only 25% actually see the inside of a courtroom.
Okay, I see where this is going.
And of those who go to trial, maybe only 50% are actually convicted.
So you multiply those probabilities together, 20% times 25% times 50%. That gives you a true mathematical risk of just 2.5%.
Exactly.
A 2.5% chance of a $500,000 fine is a calculated financial risk of exactly $12,500.
Add in a couple thousand for a really good lawyer, and your total financial exposure is maybe $15,000.
Compare that $15,000 risk to the $100,000 guaranteed profit.
Right. If you look at it strictly as an entrepreneur, that is a highly rational, profitable business decision.
It really is.
And Konkin argued that as people participate in the counter-economy, they figure out how to lower their risk even further.
Yeah.
Using better encryption, smarter smuggling routes, or building trustworthy, closed networks.
So as the risk approaches zero, counter-economics just becomes irresistible.
Exactly.
We actually saw this play out in real life in the 1970s, when the U.S. government enacted the national 55-mile-per-hour speed limit.
Oh, yeah, this is a great example.
Independent truckers were suddenly losing money. They were legally required to drive slower, which meant fewer deliveries and less income.
But instead of lobbying Congress to change the law,
Right. Instead of politics, they organically engaged in mass counter-economics.
the citizens banned radio boom.
Yes. Truckers installed CB radios to form convoys and actively outsmart the highway patrol, or Smokey Bear, as they called them.
Smokey Bear, right.
By warning each other miles in advance about speed traps, they artificially lowered the apprehension rate to almost zero.
So they traded the risk of a speeding ticket for the profit of faster delivery times.
Exactly. And in the process, they created a massive counterculture of defiance with its own slang and music. They just bypassed the state regulation completely.
A perfect micro-example of agorism. The state tries to control behavior, the market finds a technological workaround to lower the risk, and the regulation effectively collapses.
But if everyone shifts to this underground economy following that exact same risk-reward logic, eventually the state is starved of tax revenue and crumbles.
Which is Konkin's ultimate goal.
Right, but that raises a massive practical question. Without a state, how do we prevent absolute chaos? If someone breaks into my house and robs me, I can't call the police.
Well, in an agorist society, everything is a market service, and that includes protection and dispute resolution. Justice is completely privatized.
Okay, let's use a practical scenario.
Imagine a thief breaks in and steals your really expensive media center. Under our current system, you call the state police.
Right.
But realistically, the police are rarely going to recover stolen electronics. They take a report for your insurance, and that's usually the end of it.
Which leaves the victim feeling entirely uncompensated.
Precisely. But in an agorist society, you call your laissez-faire insurance and protection company. You pay a premium for their service, similar to car insurance today.
Okay.
When you report the theft, their first priority isn't to punish the criminal. Their priority is to make you whole. They immediately replace your screens and consoles.
Wait, really? They just replace it?
Yeah, they restore your subjective values so your life is back to normal as quickly as possible.
Okay, my stuff is replaced. But what happens to the thief? Is there just no consequence?
That's where the profit motive kicks in for the protection company, because they are now out the cost of your TV.
Ah, okay.
So they dispatch their private detectives to track down the thief. Because they operate in a competitive market, they are highly incentivized to be fast and efficient.
Because they want their money back.
Right. When they locate the thief, they take them to a market arbitrator, a private judge whose reputation for fairness is agreed upon by both the victims and the thief's protection agencies.
Interesting.
If found guilty, the thief is forced to pay restitution. Not just the cost of the media center, but the cost of the private detectives, the arbitration fees, and interest for the time you were without your property.
Okay, I mean, I buy that market forces might weed out a rogue individual, but let's scale this up.
Yeah.
A local insurance company cannot stop the U.S. military. So what does this all mean? If justice is just a private business, what stops a rogue protection agency from becoming a new government, or a foreign nation from just invading this stateless society with tanks?
Konkin had a really fascinating two-part answer for this. First, defensively, he theorized that a rogue agency would go bankrupt as clients leave, and other agencies would shut it down.
And against a foreign invasion.
Syndicates of these protection companies would pool their vast resources to defend their profitable market territory. Additionally, citizens would form guerrilla militias.
Malicious, like volunteers.
Yeah, he pointed to historical examples like the Ukrainian anarchists led by Nestor Makhno, They successfully raised citizen militias to protect local farmers from massive organized state armies during the Russian Revolution.
Wow. Okay.
But Konkin's second point goes much deeper. It's into revisionist history regarding the nature of war itself.
How so?
Konkin argued that wars are almost entirely caused by states seeking economic gain or territorial expansion, disguised under the banner of patriotism.
Right.
For example, he cited the War of 1812 as a U.S. land grab for Canada, and the Spanish-American War as a blatant grab for colonial territories.
So his underlying thesis was what?
That without a state apparatus to forcefully tax citizens, there is literally no money to fund a multi-trillion-dollar military. War is incredibly expensive.
Right. People wouldn't voluntarily pay for that.
Exactly. A free market wouldn't fund a foreign war because there's zero profit in it for the average person. Take away the state, and you remove the primary economic engine for warfare entirely.
You would think that this vision, a purely free market without a state or war, would be universally championed by all libertarians.
You think so?
But when Konkin published these ideas, it triggered a massive philosophical civil war within the libertarian movement over how to actually achieve liberty.
You really did.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It sparked this bitter feud between Konkin and one of the most prominent economists of the 20th century, Murray and Rothbard.
It was a profound strategic and economic divide. I mean, Konkin had zero tolerance for what he called minarchism.
Which is the desire for just a very small, limited state, right?
Right. He also despised partyarchy. To Konkin, trying to achieve libertarian, anti-state ends through statist means like running candidates in the Libertarian Party to gain political power was just a complete contradiction.
He believed that playing the political game only legitimizes the system that oppresses you.
Exactly. But Rothbard, who was effectively the intellectual godfather of modern libertarianism, just tore into Konkin's theories.
Let's look at Rothbard's economic critique first, because he took serious issue with Konkin's view on wage labor.
Yeah, he did.
Konkin envisioned an economy entirely made up of independent contractors, right? Viewing traditional wage labor as a hangover from feudalism. Why did Rothbard think that was absurd?
Well, Rothbard pointed out a fatal flaw involving what economists called transaction costs.
Okay, what does that mean in this context?
Think about heavy manufacturing. Say, building automobiles or smelting steel. You cannot run a car factory with a decentralized network of independent black market contractors.
Oh, I see.
Imagine if the person installing the steering wheel had to negotiate a new independent contract with the chassis builder every single morning in secret.
That sounds like a nightmare.
The friction, the time, the sheer effort of making those deals, the transaction costs, would completely paralyze production. Large-scale industry requires structured organizations, long-term planning, and steady wage labor.
That makes total sense. I mean, you can't build airplanes on the gray market.
No, you can't. Rothbard also vigorously defended the Libertarian Party as the only practical way to actually repeal laws.
Because a black market is great for buying contraband or evading a sales tax, but a black market cannot repeal a law?
Right. It cannot eliminate the withholding tax that is automatically deducted from a wage earner's paycheck before they even see the money.
Yeah, the money's gone before you can even hide it.
Exactly. Rothbard insisted that political action is the only practical mechanism to actually wipe oppressive laws off the books.
He also defended billionaire Charles Koch, right?
He did. He defended Koch and his network of philanthropic organizations, which Konkin had derisively labeled the cocktopus.
The cocktopus.
Yeah. Konkin viewed Koch's top-down financial influence as centralizing and corrupting to the grassroots movement. But Rothbard countered that, from a practical standpoint, it is incredibly foolish to drive away a multimillionaire who is voluntarily willing to fund the movement.
Right. But the most striking part of Rothbard's defense of the political system is his slave analogy.
Oh, this is a powerful argument.
Because remember, Konkin viewed voting as an immoral act, a way of participating in the violence of the state.
Right.
So Rothbard countered this by asking you to imagine you are a slave on a plantation. Every 4 years, you are allowed to vote between two masters. One master is cruel and tortures you, but the other master is relatively kind and lets you keep some of your crops.
Okay.
Rothbard argued that voting for the kind master is not a moral endorsement of the institution of slavery. It is simply an act of self-defense.
Therefore, voting isn't inherently evil, it's just a tactical necessity to reduce harm. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the clash of visions is crystal clear here. Rothbard believed in using the existing political machinery to roll back the state from the top down.
But Konkin stood his ground on infrastructural substitution.
Right. You don't ask the state to dismantle itself. You build alternative economic networks from the ground up until the state simply withers away because literally no one is using its currency or its services.
And while Konkin and Rothbard were debating this in obscure newsletters in the 1980s, the 21st century delivered a technological tool that would put Konkin's theories to the ultimate test.
The internet.
Mm-hmm.
And more specifically, cryptocurrency.
Right.
Agorism found a natural, almost inevitable home in hacker culture and the cypherpunk movement.
Because the internet provided the borderless global infrastructure.
And cryptography provided the exact protection from state surveillance that Konkin said the countereconomy would need to thrive.
We saw this explode into the public consciousness with the Dread Pirate Roberts, the pseudonymous founder of the Silk Road online market.
Oh yeah, the Silk Road.
It was this massive, untraceable black market operating on the dark web using Bitcoin. And the Dread Pirate Roberts explicitly cited Agorism as his direct inspiration.
Wow.
For him, every single transaction that took place outside state control strengthened the Agora and weakened the state.
It was Konkin's theory brought to life on a global scale. The Silk Road wasn't just about facilitating illicit goods, For its creators, it was a philosophical statement of infrastructural substitution.
But we don't even have to look at dark web contraband to see this in action. The sources provide a profound macro example of counter-economic saving lives out in the open.
You're talking about Venezuela.
Yes. During the economic collapse of Venezuela, the situation there was horrific. The state-controlled currency, the bolivar, suffered a staggering 14,000% hyperinflation.
14,000%. That is just, it's hard to even comprehend.
Right. To put that in perspective, imagine buying a bag of rice, and a few days later, that same bag of rice cost twice as much, and your paycheck hasn't changed at all.
The national money was rendered essentially worthless. People were starving.
And fearing they were losing control, the Venezuelan dictatorship tried to launch their own state-controlled, oil-backed cryptocurrency called the petro.
And the citizens completely rejected it.
Completely.
They recognized the petro for what it was, just another mechanism of state control and surveillance. Instead, they turned to decentralized, mainstream cryptocurrencies to survive. They bypassed the state entirely.
There is a highly specific, emotional anecdote from the sources that perfectly illustrates the power of this. A Venezuelan user on Reddit, going by the handle Windows7733, received a tiny donation of 0.5 nano from someone online so he could buy some food.
And it's crucial to understand why nano was used here.
Why is that?
Because nano is a feeless cryptocurrency. There are no network fees eating into the transaction. Every fraction of a cent is received, and it's completely untrackable by the Venezuelan government.
Exactly. So Windows 7733 went back to the Reddit community to thank them for this tiny lifeline. And the community was so moved by his situation that they flooded his wallet with 90.1 nano.
Wow.
At the time, that was worth about $208 US. With that $208, which the state could not track, tax, or confiscate, he bought 400 kilograms of food.
Incredible.
He fed 40 families in his community. That is a pure counter-economic transaction. It completely ignored the Venezuelan state, bypassed their currency controls, and directly satisfied human needs.
And modern agorist tools like local bitcoins and Open Bazaar were built precisely to facilitate these kinds of peer-to-peer exchanges globally.
Right.
But this raises an important question about the future of this struggle.
Okay.
As the counter-economy relies increasingly on advanced encryption to hide transactions and protect its users, the state is not sitting idly by. Governments are pouring billions into an arms race to crack these encryptions.
Specifically utilizing the immense power of quantum computing.
Right, yes, exactly.
Explain the mechanics of that threat for a second. Why are quantum computers so dangerous to the digital black market?
Well, current encryption, like the locks protecting your banking, your crypto, your private messages, it relies on incredibly complex math problems, usually involving multiplying giant prime numbers.
Right, which takes a lot of computing power to crack.
Right. It would take a normal computer millions of years to reverse engineer those numbers to break the lock.
Right.
But quantum computers operate on qubits.
Qubits?
Yeah, allowing them to test multiple possibilities simultaneously. A powerful enough quantum computer could solve those math problems and shatter those cryptographic locks in seconds.
In seconds, wow.
The state hopes to use this to rip the roof off the digital agora. The question is, will the counter-economy respond fast enough with quantum cryptography of its own? The race to secure the future of the digital black market is very much ongoing.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today, from theoretical texts in the 1980s to the hyperinflation of Venezuela and the bleeding edge of quantum cryptography. But why should this matter to you, the listener, right now?
Because according to Samuel Edward Konkin III, almost everyone is already participating in the counter-economy to some degree.
Right. That's the most surprising takeaway here. You don't have to be a dark web hacker to be an agorist.
No, you are likely part of the spectrum already.
Think about it. Whether you are paying a teenage babysitter in cash off the books, or whether you are using decentralized digital money to bypass banking fees.
Or even if you are just driving 75 miles per hour in a 55 zone because you judge the risk of a ticket is worth getting home to your family faster.
You are actively participating in the exact forces SEK3 described. You are weighing risk against profit, and you are choosing to prioritize your own subjective values over the dictates of the state.
You are participating in infrastructural substitution on a micro level.
But I want to leave you with a final, lingering question to mull over, building on everything we've discussed today. The sources clearly state that a government only survives on the sanction of the victim and the physical limits of its own enforcement.
Simply put, they can't afford to catch everyone.
Right. But we are rapidly approaching an era of artificial intelligence and central bank digital currencies. So what happens in the near future if AI allows the state to automate total financial surveillance?
That is a terrifying thought.
What if algorithmic taxation is instantly deducted from every transaction you make without needing a single human police officer to enforce it?
If the state's physical limits of enforcement are just removed entirely by AI,
Could a decentralized AI-driven black market become the only remaining space on Earth where human agency, privacy, and free trade can actually survive?
it's a profound question. If the state becomes a perfect machine, the only escape might be a better machine.
Definitely something to think about the next time you decide to drive a little over the speed limit. Thank you for exploring these radical ideas on this deep dive with us today. Stay curious, keep questioning the world around you, and we'll see you next time.